Are you struggling to grow your business because sales just aren't where they need to be? Or maybe you have a great product, but the customer just isn't coming like you expected. If that sounds familiar, then today's episode is for you. Welcome back to another episode of the Vital Wealth Strategies podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lonergan, and today we're diving into one of the most crucial aspects of business growth, sales. Whether you're an entrepreneur looking to scale or just trying to figure out why your business isn't reaching that next level, this conversation is going to change the way you think about sales forever. Joining me today is Dave Hanley, a seasoned entrepreneur, B2B sales expert, and three-time founder with over $200 million in successful exits. He's worked in tech, SaaS, and enterprise sales, and he knows firsthand what it takes to turn a struggling sales process into a revenue-generating machine. In this episode, Dave shares his COD framework, a game-changing way to structure your sales messaging, the biggest mistake entrepreneurs make when selling, and why having the best product isn't enough to succeed. He also reveals how to develop a repeatable sales process that can help you scale your business beyond $10 million in revenue. If you've ever thought, I built it, so they should come, this episode is going to shake up that mindset. Stick around to the end because we're covering strategies that could completely transform the way you approach sales and ultimately the success of your business. Before we dive in, if you're an entrepreneur making over $1 million a year and you're not actively working to minimize your tax burden, you're losing money. That's exactly what we help with at Vital Strategies. Visit vitalstrategies.com/tax to see how much you could be saving. Let's dive in. Dave Hanley, thank you for joining us here today. I'm excited about this conversation. You're an entrepreneur, seasoned B2B sales practitioner and coach, and also a three-time co-founder. So you've been through the ringer, understand what it takes to build a business from scratch into something that is very healthy, over $10 million in sales. And I think this conversation is going to be great. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Yeah, and thanks for having me, Patrick.
So I'd like to just jump in and I think about what it takes to get to $10 million in sales and revenue into our business. And oftentimes we start off with a great product and we're excited about that. Most of the time, if we think about the book, The Entrepreneur Myth, right? The good technician comes in and they're like, I got a fantastic opportunity for the marketplace. Let's push this out there. You build it and they will come. But I think the problem with that is quickly we find out that just because I built it, they don't necessarily come. Now, I think there's a key point that we need to identify. I have to have a great product, right? I can go put a great marketing and sales system in place, but if I'm selling a piece of crap, it's not going to work out in the marketplace. But I can also have a great product, and if I don't have fantastic sales and marketing to go along with it, we're not going to see the success we want. So, yes, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to this. When I think about the problems that the entrepreneur has, I generally see, the first one is they create the product, then all of a sudden it dawns on them like, okay, I got to start making some sales. I've got to increase revenue because now I'm starting to take on overhead and all those other pieces, and it's a challenge. And then there's the problem with how do I juggle all of this, right? Like I'm running the business, and generally I'm trying to make some sales, and then there's almost a philosophical problem of, man, I have a great product. Why aren't people showing up and buying this? So, I'd like to get into a little bit of the thinking about how we scale up our business till we get to the point of $10 million in sales.
Yeah, well, Patrick, it's like you said, I think you mentioned one of the kind of precursors to this whole, growing your business and driving revenue is having a great product, right? Mm. I would actually tweak that a little bit and say you have to have a good enough product, right? As you mentioned, I'm a three-time co-founder of various businesses. One was an enterprise software company, the other was a SaaS company, and the other one was an ad tech marketplace. And every time I would say, humbly, we had a good enough product, right? Mm-hmm. And in every case, we had some competitors that, frankly, I think they had better products than us, right? Yep. But what we had that they didn't have is really, really strong sales acumen. And that set us apart. And frankly, I firmly believe that good sales can be a differentiator, and it can be a strategic advantage over your competition.
Yeah. And if I think an easy example to point to is McDonald's does not have the best hamburger, right? They are not selling the best hamburger in the marketplace, right? What they're selling is, I'll say, a little bit of consistency, but they've got a great marketing and sales machine that just continues to drive people to McDonald's to keep buying that, I'll say, terrible product.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic point. And I think there's just something too about, telling a compelling story, right, in the marketplace to
Hmm.
get people to go, hey, yeah, that might not be the best product, but I don't need to go test everything in the marketplace. I've got trust with that organization, and I can move forward with this transaction, and it will be good enough to get the job done. So I'm excited to hear about, like, because I think this is a struggle that so many entrepreneurs have, right? We think about the entrepreneur aspiring to make $1 million in net income,
Hmm.
right, or more, and we need to have tremendous sales, right? If I have 10% profit margin on $10 million, now I finally net
Yeah.
my $1 million. Now I might be in a service business that has higher margins, and I don't have to quite get to that threshold, but I think that's a great place to get to. Now, I think one thing that I find really interesting is you look at the marketplace and you see a business opportunity, and you know that you can take your sales skills and apply it and take that business to the next level, because you identified the success you had in three different businesses, and those
Hmm.
were all three different arenas. It wasn't like
Yep.
you were doing
Over and over
software,
again.
right?
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to hearing what those, like, foundational principles
Yeah.
are to take sales to the next level.
Yeah, because Patrick, it really does apply to any business. And keep in mind, I've spent my career in B2B. So when
Mm-hmm.
this conversation today is more revolving around, hey, you've got a product, you're trying to sell it to a company who's trying to achieve some type of outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, what really opened my eyes quite a bit to the problem that a lot of entrepreneurs have is, after my first two companies, I took a little bit of a hiatus and I went to spend some time as an entrepreneur in residence at a startup accelerator.
Mm-hmm.
I'm originally from the Toronto area. Great startup accelerator there called the DMZ, and they had, I think it was like 60 or 70 companies in there. And my job was to sit in a room 2 days a week, and these founders would come in, and I'd say, okay, I'm here to help. How are things going? What are your challenges? And
Mm-hmm.
literally 95% of the time or more, it was sales. It was, we have a great
Yep.
product. Here's all the
Mm-hmm.
bells and whistles and features. And it really boiled down to the same thing. Oftentimes there were technical founders, like you said, somebody who, like, was in an industry, saw a need, built a strong offering. But then when it came time to engage with a potential customer, they really leaned into what their strengths are, which is talking about features and technology and the APIs and, integration and all that type of thing. And the customer's eyes, kind of glaze over and they go, okay, this sounds like the last, sales pitch that I
Mm-hmm.
got. Right.
Yep. Yep.
And I've been privy to many of those not so great sales presentations and sales demos.
Yeah.
And really what it boils down to is, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you have to look at your product, you have to look at your customer and say, we need to figure out what our value proposition is here. And it's not all the features and functions and, things like that. It's, three things. In my book, I use the acronym COD. The first one is, like, what is your capability? What do you actually do? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the key thing there is to talk about that in a simple way that your customers and prospects can understand. Not like using, like, in today's world, all these, AI, large language models, all that technology that really the customer doesn't care about. They
Mm-hmm.
care about what can you do, and that capability should relate to the next thing, which is outcomes. What are the outcomes that your customer is trying to achieve?
Mm-hmm.
And really, in a B2B setting, that's, one of three things, or maybe multiple of these three things. It's either increase revenue, reduce expenses, or reduce risk. That's
Mm-hmm.
it. Like, that's the only reason why companies spend money, unless you're selling to government or something like that. Then there's some reasons we're not quite sure
Right.
on, why they're
Yep.
buying
Yep.
things. And then lastly, which is kind of the most difficult one to really think of and think through and kind of put pen to paper on, is differentiators. Like, what makes you
Mm-hmm.
different? Why should they talk to you, and why should they listen to you? And why should they lean on you to solve their problem, as opposed to all the other competitors out there in the marketplace? And And I think the other thing that a lot of founders don't think about is one of the biggest competitors that they have when they're talking to a business and trying to sell them a product
Hmm.
is the biggest competitor is the company's just not going to do anything. They're just
Right.
going to keep doing what they're doing today, which is maybe nothing, maybe using a fax machine or, email or, or
Yeah.
an Excel sheet, right?
Yeah.
So really it's building that value proposition out and really coming up with a succinct statement when you talk to somebody
Hmm.
who's a prospect to say, this is what we actually do. And here's how
Yeah.
we help companies like you. And here's why we're unique in the
Yeah.
marketplace.
I love it. And I think one of the things, so just going through each of those COD, the capability piece, I think it's actually really challenging to simplify
Mm-hmm.
down what you do into a one line, like, this is who we are. This is what we do in a simple way. And because oftentimes, you'll ask somebody, so what do you do? And they talk for like 45 minutes on, all of the things they do. And I'm like, I'm not very clear
Mm-hmm.
on what that is, right? Like when I think about what we're doing at Vital, it's helping entrepreneurs minimize their taxes, master wealth, and optimize their life, right? Like
Yeah.
simple, right? Now, there might be a better way to clarify that to go, well, what does that necessarily mean? But like I know I can say that to people and they go, well, that's interesting. Tell me more, right? Like we can get into that. And so I think the simple part is pretty challenging. And then I think I don't know if you have any comments on that. I'll just stop there.
Yeah, no, I think that that is difficult sometimes. And one of the things I would caution against, and I've seen this a few times, is, let's say your company plays in a certain space. For example, my first business was in enterprise software for insurance companies.
Yeah.
And the category was called policy administration systems, right?
Mhm.
Not super exciting, but
Yeah.
really great business to be in. Insurance companies have all kinds of money to spend, right?
Yeah.
And what I saw at one point many years ago is a company came out with what was pretty much a policy administration system, but they came up with another name for it. They called it like an underwriting workbench or something.
Yeah.
And what was interesting is to watch the market kind of look at that and go, what is that? I don't know what that is, right? Like
Mhm.
they're like, the analogy that somebody came up with in the industry was like insurance companies, they know how to, if they're used to having horses, they buy horses, they feed horses, they keep them in the barn. If you come to the table and say, hey, I've got this zebra, they're like, I don't know what a zebra is. I don't know how to
Yeah.
feed that. What do I feed it? Where do I put it? In a barn or
Mhm.
in a field? And so like, you don't want to get too fancy and give
Mhm.
your product some, new category or new name that people aren't going to be familiar with. But I think when you're talking about your capabilities, you definitely want to at least narrow that down. So when you talk to a prospect, you're literally saying, here's who this is for and here's who it's not for.
Yeah.
Like, for example, when I was in that policy administration business, we said we have a policy administration platform for insurance companies of a certain size, and we'd give those metrics. And
Mhm.
when we talk to a company, they go, hey, we're smaller than that or we're bigger than that. It's like, that's a good thing. We want to set that filter and let people decide whether we're for them, early on. Because one of the big things you can get into a lot of trouble with in business is selling to companies that you have no business selling to in the first place. And I've been in
Yeah.
that situation. I've had clients that we did a deal with that kept me up at night, for 6 months straight and ended up being a
Mhm.
complete nightmare. And really, when I think about why it happened, it's because we didn't define who our product was for and who it's not for.
Yep.
And if we had at the time a really good value proposition, we would have said to them, "Hey, here's what we do," and they would have said, "That's not us." And we said, "Okay, well, here's maybe some other companies you want to talk to, but
Right.
we're not a great fit."
Yeah, I love that. And then moving on to the O for outcomes, I think that's an important piece because oftentimes what we want to talk about as business owners is like all of the cool things we can do, but really what the client is concerned about is
Hmm.
like, what does this mean for me,
For
right?
sure.
And I can use my own examples, and you can tell me if we're off base with this. But like one of the things that we talk about is we save our average consulting client $280,000 of income tax, right? Like, so people can go, oh, okay, I can either decide that's something I'm excited about
Hmm.
or not, right? And or I don't have, a little bit of what happens there is, we are adjusting the expectations as to who we work with, right? Like if I'm not even paying
Yeah,
280,000 of income
exactly.
tax, I'm obviously not an ideal client for the Vital team. So I think outcomes is awfully important to focus on, because I think as it's just easy to go to a business owner or a business website and they're just talking all about themselves. It's like,
Hmm.
well, I think this is missing a little bit of the point. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I think that's a fantastic distinction.
Yeah, when you think about outcomes, I mean, talking about your value proposition, but even from the first meeting that you have with a prospect, right? I mean, I like to literally start off the meeting with, here's who we are, here's why we exist. And then the next thing is, here's how we've helped companies like you. We've, like you said,
Mhm.
we've helped them save, on average $280,000 in income tax. In a
Mhm.
software business, maybe it's, we've increased their productivity in this area by X. Being able to put a number on those things is really, really important,
Mhm.
because it
Yeah.
adds a lot of credibility and it gives them an idea of what they can expect, right? Hey, we've kind of reduced this workflow from 2 weeks to 2 days, on average.
Yeah.
And what you're going to find when you talk to a customer in terms of those outcomes and how you've helped companies like them is, number one, it gives them insight that you have experience. So they're like, hey, this is reducing our risk. These guys have done this before.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, Number two, they kind of get this sense of, it allows them to open up a little bit to say, hey, other people have this problem that we have. So they're not really guarded in terms of like, hey, I don't want to tell these people that we have this terrible workflow that takes 2 weeks and we really want to get it down to 2 days, but we have no idea how to do
Mhm.
that. By telling them there's all kinds of companies out there like you that have this same problem,
Mhm.
and you're just the next one that we can help here, that lets them open up a little bit, and you're kind of like holding up a mirror to them to say, here's the problems that we solve, and they go, we have those problems, like, let's talk.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. And then looking at differentiator, and I think you made a key distinction earlier, talking about the insurance company, and it's like we deal with horses, right? And
Hmm.
then you bring a zebra into the equation, and it's like, well, we don't know what to do with that. And so I'm curious how we reconcile a couple of those things. I've heard this, and I like this thinking around giving somebody a new opportunity, right? Like this isn't the same thing you've tried over and over again. Like this
Hmm.
is a new opportunity, but it can't be too different, right? Like it
Yeah.
can't be a drastic change from what they're used to. It needs to almost be evolutionary. So, can you talk about that? And I'm also excited to get into the discussion around like inertia.
Hmm.
Sometimes an object in motion stays in motion. Want to keep on that path, or and I think getting clients to change off of their current path to do
For
something
sure.
new and different is a challenge.
The key thing when you're putting your differentiators together is, it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, hey, what makes us different as a company? And a lot of the first things that come out of, a founder's mouth is, well, we've got a ton of experience. We've been around for 25 years, or we have great customer service. And it's like, well, that might be your opinion, but it's not really factual and
Hmm.
it's not measurable, right? I mean, that's one of those things that when you look at it, um, if you can't put a number on it and you can't really, really look hard at that differentiator and say, is this actually different from our competitors? Then you
Hmm.
shouldn't really talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, you know, as an example, one of the easiest things you can do in terms of differentiators is if you're in a space that, there are a lot of different options for your product, like maybe your product is applicable to 20 different industries.
Hmm.
And I've worked with some clients on the consulting side where they say, "Hey, our product can work for any industry," which is fantastic. And I go, "That's actually not that great, especially in terms of presenting it to your prospects, because I firmly believe that people like to buy from specialists, not generalists."
Yeah.
And by saying, look, we specialize in the, insurance industry or the financial services industry, or we specialize in working with credit unions, or, whatever your specialization is, that
Yep.
alone, I think, is a differentiator in a lot of cases. If there are a lot of competitors out there that do serve multiple verticals, I firmly believe that that's an easy way, is to think about what industries do we serve and should we serve here.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great. And I remember hearing a mentor of mine talk about how they were on a panel with a few other people in their industry, and
Hmm.
going down the line, the panelists were talking about the same thing. They were saying, "Oh yeah, we serve all of these people," and they were trying to make the net as broad as possible. And they got to him, and he was like, "I serve this micro niche of people."
Hmm.
And he's talking to a group of a few hundred folks. And afterwards, you know, the people that identified with who needed his services, like came up to him and were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Hey, let's talk more about it." Where the generalist had nobody coming to talk to them after the discussion. And so
Yeah.
I think that's a key piece there.
Well, and what that leads to, Patrick, too, is when you do identify this is our like micro targeting in terms of the customer that's an ideal fit for us, is that as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you're going to spend a lot less time talking to people that you have no business talking to in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And one of our most scarce resources as entrepreneurs is our time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side effect to that is, as entrepreneurs, we also tend, and I've done this many times myself, we tend to get, shiny object syndrome. And,
Yeah.
we get somebody coming in the door that if we haven't defined our target market, then when someone comes in the door, we go, "Ooh, that could be interesting," right? And it's like, no, like just X. Don't talk.
Yeah.
Don't talk to that company. It's going to distract you and it's going to cause you all kinds of problems. But we go, "Ooh, let's check that out. That's interesting."
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. So, Dave, just to recap, our value proposition boils down to the COD, and it's our capability, our outcomes that we produce for the
Mm-hmm.
client, and then our differentiators.
Yep.
Anything else to add to value proposition before we move on to the next step?
No, I think just to underscore, Patrick, that this is the first thing that you need to define for your
Mm-hmm.
business, right? Because this goes into everything. This goes into all of your presentations to your prospects. This goes into your website marketing material. This goes into all of your decks and all your presentations that you're going to do at trade shows. This is like the foundation of the house here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is a really important step, and it seems simple, but it's going to take it's going to take some time. It's going to take getting in a room with the team and a whiteboard and banging it out and going, is this differentiator unique? No, okay, X,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next one. So it's an exercise, and frankly, the other thing that makes this difficult is it's constantly evolving as your
Mm-hmm.
business evolves. And the other thing I've actually seen a few times is, depending on, in certain businesses, who your actual end customer is, your value proposition gets tweaked a little bit.
Yeah.
So for one set of customers or one market, for one product that you have, it may be different from another market, depending on who you're actually selling it to, and that needs to resonate with the buyer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love this because I just think about where we're at internally, and it's been absolutely an evolutionary process. And it's nice to work on it, set it aside, come back and look
Mm-hmm.
at it, week or month later and go, how does that feel? You try it on, you're
Mm-hmm.
like, it's close,
Yeah.
but it's not quite right. And you make some fine tuning
Yeah.
adjustments. So,
Well, I think the one little tip too is, sometimes you get stuck and you go, well, we think this is, when you're thinking about differentiators specifically, it's
mhm,
like, well, why do our clients buy from us?
yeah.
Why do they pick us and not the competition? Here's a little hack. Go ask them, why did you actually choose us?
Yeah.
What made us different from all the other people you talk to? And that'll help to feed, some of that information for your value prop.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And I recently heard I can't remember where I heard it, coach, consultant, something along those lines was ask your clients, what are we doing well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they will give you the thing that they're measuring you by, right?
Mm,
They'll go, hey, you're killing it at this thing, and that should be a thing you now start to focus on for
yeah,
that client, right? Like, okay,
absolutely.
they're clearly measuring me based on that, so I'm going to just be dialed in on that piece. So I think it's absolutely true. Like, go figure out what your clients are saying they like about you, and then do that thing. So good. So what's next after I develop my value proposition? What do I need to
Yeah.
do?
So, I mean, we've kind of talked about this a little bit already, but the next step is figuring out, okay, now that we've defined our value proposition, who is it that we're going to sell to? Like,
Hmm.
who's our target customer? What's our ideal customer profile,
Yeah.
right? And essentially, again, you want to narrow that down while you're building your value proposition. But then the key thing when you're actually looking at your target market is figuring out who you're going to prioritize, right?
Mhm.
Because again, maybe you've defined who you're going to sell to, and there's 1,000 of those companies. You
Yep.
can't really, in a well put together manner, go after all 1,000. You need to figure out, okay, let's come up with a hit list here. Who's our top 50? What do the
Mhm.
characteristics look like of the companies that we're going to go after? And you really want to prioritize that based on clients you want to win,
Hmm.
clients that you have a good probability to win, because we all have limited resources.
Right.
And then we want to work with clients that we think we can actually add a lot of value for, because what's going to
Yeah.
happen then, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're going to get a customer, you're going to do a great job. That's going to lead to more customers like them, because, good word travels fast.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. So I think this is an important thing to talk about. And I'm going to marry sales and marketing together to some
Hmm.
level, right? Like marketing, we talked about website and our messaging and that type of thing, and people are going to see that and resonate with it. And then, I'll say there's sort of a funnel process, right? And we're going to take people through that. But I love what you're talking about here, because I could see some listeners going 1,000, right? Like I'm marketing to 100,000 people, right?
Hmm.
Trying to convert the 50 into sales, and I like the distinction that you're making to go, no, we're gonna trim that number down, and then we're really going to focus in on these top 50. And is that where the sales process comes in? Like, okay, I'm going to go make some sort of personal connection with these top 50 people, get to know the issues they've got going on, the pain points, and figure out how we can deliver value to their situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And so really this parlays into two things. Number one being your actual sales process, which,
Mhm.
every company needs to have a defined set of steps that they use to start and
Yeah.
finish a sale. And then really one of the first steps of that process is going to be demand generation. So
Hmm.
really figuring out who you want to go after, and then going outbound and engaging with those prospects. And I think too many companies today, specifically, when I talk to all those companies at that accelerator, they're like, we've got a lot of ads running, we've got a lot of marketing out there, we're going to trade shows. That's
Hmm.
great. You definitely need to raise awareness for your company and your product. But really what we need to do as, founders and entrepreneurs that want to, drive the business forward, is we need to figure out who are those companies and proactively go out there and engage with them.
Hmm.
And a lot of times the big mistake that I see made as well is, okay, we put together a generic outreach sequence and just blast it out there. Like that just
Hmm.
doesn't cut it. And, I've talked to entrepreneurs before that I coach, and they're saying, well, we're sending out all these email sequences, and we sent out 100, and we're maybe getting, one meeting out of that. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, I'm pretty sure if I actually send out 10 to your 100, but first I do my research, I figure out what's this company up to, what are their priorities.
Hmm.
When you're actually looking at, say, a publicly traded company and you're trying to penetrate that account, like what are they talking about in their 10K filings? What are
Hmm.
they struggling with? What are some of the areas of opportunity that they're trying to go after? And what you're going to find when you do that initial research and you tie that to, your product being able to help them achieve those outcomes, when you send an email that's personalized, that actually, revolves around that outcome, when you pick up the phone, I know, crazy idea sometimes nowadays, but it actually still does
Yeah.
work. There's some other great, outreach
Hmm.
tools that you can use, like a Vidyard or something like that, to send a
Yeah.
personalized, again, not some
Yeah.
generic spammy thing, a
Right.
personalized video email to somebody. I've recently have seen some really great, LinkedIn outreach, which is kind
Hmm.
of video based as well. So somebody will send me a note, say, is that something you're interested in? And then they'll send me a personal video and saying, hey, here's a little bit more about us and how we can help, somebody like you. And so
Yeah.
there's just so many of these channels that we can use. I think the big mistake that a lot of companies make now when they're prospecting and trying to generate interest is they're keeping it really generic. It's not engaging. It's the same old stuff. You've seen it, Patrick. You get emails
Yep.
probably all day long from people. It's like, it's
Yep.
not interesting,
Yep.
but the best, in my last business, I was literally thinking about a problem, and somebody emailed me and said, hey, went on your site, I noticed this. It was a churn management solution. Hey, I noticed
Hmm.
your cancellation workflow is X. We
Hmm.
help companies like you increase or decrease their churn by this percentage. And if this is
Yeah.
something you're thinking about, let's talk. And I go, yeah, this is something I'm thinking about, right? So, they actually
Yeah.
did some research and they came to me with something that was relevant. And I think that's key.
Yeah.
And then from then on, it's continue to deliver value throughout that prospecting life
Hmm.
cycle. Be persistent. I think I heard a stat before. It's like it's 7 to 12 outreach, you know, touch points to actually connect with a prospect. And, you know, the problem is most salespeople give up after 3, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
there's a big disconnect there.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. There's so many things that you're touching on that I think are valuable. And the one thing that I'd like to highlight is just the personal connection that you're making, right? Like, even if I spend time understanding the client situation and send them a personalized email. Now, I can template, we'll say 80% of that
Mm-hmm.
email, but I'm hitting some key points in there to address it to the client. I also love the idea of, if somebody's a prospect, it might actually be faster to turn on your camera and put together a 3-minute video talking through, like, hey, I saw these things. I think we can help with those.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how we're going to do it. Here's the next steps to connect with us, right? Have a little bit of a hook, right? Like, here's the problem, here's the story, and then here's the offer to, like, fix this thing. I think is awfully important. And I think there's some old school, here's where people have gotten my attention before. Personalized things, right? Like, if I get a handwritten note from somebody,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, hey, this is somebody took a minute, and they're not just grinding out 1,000 or 100,000 of these, things, spamming me, hoping to get a
This is what
response, right?
this is what I have in my drawer here. I have note cards that I send
Yeah,
out handwritten notes to people on.
yeah, yep.
And that's, thank you notes. It's notes
Mhm,
to potential customers.
yep.
Sometimes right now I'll take a copy of my book, and I think somebody would be a good
Mhm,
fit to just
yep,
read the book and maybe engage with me on a coaching basis. I'll sign the book, write a little note in
mhm,
it,
yep,
send it over to them. So that's, I mean, nowadays that's pretty unique, right? You,
yeah,
you think
yep,
it's kind of a little bit
right.
ridiculous that that's unique, but it is.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. I am very much the same. I've got a stack of note cards, and the nice thing about a note card is you don't have to write for days and days, right? Like, I can
Hmm.
write a few lines,
Yep.
and the note card's filled up. And then I also send out a ton of books. I just think, if I
Yep.
read something that's great and we're having a conversation, I'm like, I'm just going to send this your way because I think it is applicable. And then that also piggybacks to, like, people have gotten my attention before sending me um, uh, like a priority mail thing, right? They spend
Hmm.
$10 to send it to
Yep.
me, but 100% I'm opening that thing and looking at it closely because it looks like important documentation that I need
Yeah.
to address. And so that's something too that I
Yeah.
think is
And
good.
I think a lot of founders who aren't in my book, it's a somewhat fictional story. It's
Mhm.
based on founders that I've worked with in the past, of a founder who's very uncomfortable with the concept of being in sales, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, they kind of put the message out there a few times and go, well, I guess that prospect's not interested, right? I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's busy. Like
Yep.
even myself, I get salespeople reaching out to me that, I actually am interested in what they have to offer. But
Hmm.
the ones that are persistent, the ones that kind of cut through the noise, like you said, you get a FedEx package in the, on your desk. You're like, what is this? I got to open this up, right? They're cutting through the noise. I forget what it was. I was in the advertising business for, in my last company. And when
Hmm.
you look at the number of like advertising and marketing messages that the average person has come at them on a daily basis, it's like hundreds, or I don't know, maybe even thousands. It's crazy. So you
Yeah.
have to cut through that noise
Mm.
and kind of get through to that person so they can actually pay attention to what it is that you're proposing, or what it is that your company's offering.
Yeah, I love it. So we've talked through value proposition. Now we've talked through who we sell to and how we engage with those folks.
Hmm.
What's next in the sales process? Do you have a next step?
Yeah. So when I look at founders and entrepreneurs that are doing sales for their business,
Hmm.
I think, I know this because this was me, right? Like I was an entrepreneur, and until I started actually working with a sales coach that said, look, we need to have a process for your business, to actually go through each and every sale. We were very guilty of this. We'd go in, we'd do a demo of our software. The prospect would say, great, let's do it. And we'd send them a proposal. Right? We skipped like 3 steps, and
Hmm.
sent them a proposal, and shocker, it didn't go anywhere most of the time, right? The proposal would sit on their desk and it wouldn't move because what we didn't do is we didn't determine, how do you actually make these decisions in your company? Like, who else has to be involved? What we didn't do was say, how are you going to measure success on this product, on this project? What's the ROI? If we put this software in place and you pay us $100,000 a year, what are you expecting to get out of that? And let's crunch those numbers so that when you, who's say a VP, have to take it to the CFO to get sign off, you actually have those numbers, right? We didn't have a step in our process to talk to the IT department to make sure that this is going to integrate with all of their other platforms and systems, right? So when we we thought early on, when we do a demo and someone says, give me a proposal, we go, boom, here's the proposal. We thought that was going to fast track a deal. Frankly, it made it probably go 3 times as slow as it should have, because we didn't check all the boxes. The right thing to do is to say, you get through a demo, prospect says, this is amazing, give me a proposal. You say, hold on, this is how we're going to go ahead and get this thing done. And this is how we've done many of these. We sell this software for a living. This is our step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 to make sure that this actually happens in your company. And then the other thing you need to be very cognizant of when you're presenting that process to the prospect is they have their own process for buying, right?
Right.
And quite often in my career, I'd ask somebody, okay, I know you want this product and, we want you to have it, of course, but, how do these purchases typically get done at your company? And a lot of times they go, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. So, we'd have to kind of loop some other people in, do our own research. And really a lot of times you're the one that's working hand in hand with that person in the business that's actually going to like shepherd that deal, forward. And I actually just started reading a really great book yesterday. I can't give a full, thumbs up on it yet because I'm 15 pages in. It's called Selling With, and it's all about these types of deals where all you are as a salesperson is essentially, a facilitator so that your internal champion at that client can actually get through all of their internal processes to pick your solution and to buy your product. So it's been pretty interesting even already just to start. But it just resonated with me right off the bat, because the deals that we had that were really successful, we had somebody in there who was like very credible in the company, that was working with us as the champion. And the ones that didn't really work all that great are the ones where we didn't have that person. And that's something in B2B that you really, really need to focus on. So more to come. I'll probably write up a little review on that book once I'm done.
I love it. I think the sales process is so important. And one of the things you touched on, it's so tempting, right? Like they're excited. You just had this great meeting. They're like, send me the proposal. It's so tempting to be like, yeah, let's do that. Right. Versus go, because you want the sale. You want it to get it across the finish line as fast as possible, versus go, hey, let's slow down for a second. Here's how we see this process working effectively for organizations. Here's the different pieces we need, and here's why we need it. I'm just thinking about developing that process. It sounds like to me, the way I would develop that is through a number of failures, right? You figure out why the sales process got stuck, and we go, okay, let's do a postmortem and go, here's all the stuff that went wrong, and maybe we should start doing pre-mortems, right? Like let's figure out how this deal would die before we get going in the process. And we're like, well, IT could kill it. Well, we're not talking to the decision maker. Like all of those things could help us be proactive in that process, but generally I tend to learn the most after things go sideways. I don't know if you have any thoughts on,
no, and it's just like your value proposition. It's something where you need to start somewhere, and there's very basic processes. You're going to do your demand generation to generate some opportunities, right? You'll probably have some kind of demo or presentation if you're selling SaaS or software or some kind of solution like that. You definitely have a stage where you're going to actually develop the value proposition and the return on investment. And that's generally something that you're going to do working hand in hand with the client. You're at some point going to put a proposal together. I'm a big proponent of never, ever, and this is in my book too, never sending a proposal. Like you never want to just like lob it over the fence, send an email over. You always want to get on on a Zoom or in person and say, hey, Patrick, look, I've got this proposal. We work through this ROI together.
Yeah.
Here's the proposal, here's the pricing, here's the timeline. And then I'm looking
Hmm.
you in the eyes and I might see you kind of like flinch when the price comes over. And then we go,
Yeah.
hey, let's dig into that a little bit. Or, you
Hmm.
know, getting that feedback is really, really key during that review phase of the proposal before you formally actually present it to them.
Yeah.
And then, kind of closing it and getting the agreement. And then what's going to happen is as time goes on, you're going to figure out, hey, these, like you said, these things keep getting stuck with IT kind of butting in and, putting a
Mhm.
damper on things. Let's insert, something in our process here so that we actually
Yeah.
deal with that. Because the reality is you might waste a lot of time by putting that, maybe you put that right at the end of the process and IT keeps coming in and killing these deals. You might want to put that earlier on so you don't waste your time, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you kind of learn as you go and it'll constantly evolve.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the things I see about the value of building a sales process, and I remember a Harvard study from a number of years ago that said it's it's not the organizations that have the best salespeople that have the most success on the
Mm-hmm.
selling side. It's the organizations that have the best sales process. And you take somebody, you train them up in the process, and then you give them a track to run on. So
Yep.
I assume this sales process now lets me go, cool, as a founder, I can now bring in somebody to run on this track. And sure, I might have to train them up along the way, but it allows me to sort of leverage myself because I've got um, all the steps and
Yeah.
checklists for running
You hit
sales.
the nail on the head, Patrick. And, oddly enough, right now I'm consulting with a company where they were ready to make their first big sales hire. The founder was
Mhm.
out there doing all the sales for the last several years. And he said, look, I really want to focus on, the operational side. I want to bring in a salesperson. Now they're certainly going to work with them.
Mhm.
And, they kind of tapped us to say, help us hire a salesperson. And I said, well, that's step two. Step
Mhm.
one is we need to put all of the stuff that you and I just talked about for the last, 30 minutes in play. We
Mhm.
needed to figure out their value prop, their target market, their sales process, because bringing somebody in and telling them, here's your laptop, go sell, like that's going to fail.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of, entrepreneurial companies that are scaling in the right direction and then they just hire someone they think is going to be a hotshot salesperson. Don't give them
Mhm.
any onboarding, any direction. It just doesn't work, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
this is the other reason you put this together, like you said, is so that when you are scaling to the point where it's time to bring one, two, three more salespeople in, that you can train them on this process, you can measure it,
Yeah.
and they can actually go out and execute it. And obviously, as they're out there, you might tweak it a little bit, but it's a
Mhm.
good foundation to get started.
I love it. And I think you just brought up a good business point in general, because I've seen businesses do this. I've been guilty of it at times too. I hire a new person and I just hand them a laptop. And I'm like, okay, you should
I
have
think
the
we've
skill
I think
set,
we've all
you
done
know,
this.
right? Right.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, okay, it doesn't matter what your role is. Here's the training process that
Yeah.
we're going to use to, you might have the foundational skills, but you don't have the understanding of how our organization works to, take and go be. Our whole goal when we hire somebody is to put them in a position to thrive, and you
Hmm.
can't thrive if you're feeling like you're having to make it up. So I
Yeah.
think that's fantastic. So I'd love to talk a minute about your book. So the delusional founder. Can you tell me how founders are delusional and how this ties to the sales process, and get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think every founder has to be somewhat delusional, right? To actually take this
Mhm.
crazy path in the first place. I think it's having that the right kind of delusion, right? The
Mhm.
kind of delusion where somebody says, hey, wouldn't it be safer just to get a job? It's like, okay, no, I believe in this. I think I can make this work, right? That's the right type
Yeah.
of delusion to actually get started in the first place. I think the wrong type of delusion is, the old phrase from Feel the Dreams, if you build it, they will come. A lot of
Mhm.
people think that's the case. They build this product and they think customers are going to bang the door down, and it's just not going to happen. And that's the delusion that kills a lot of companies, is that they don't know that they need to actually put all of this, sales foundation in place to
Mhm.
make this really work.
Yeah.
Like I said in the past, I've been involved with three essentially technology companies. I've never coded a line of code in my life, nor will I ever.
Mhm.
And I just got into sales kind of by accident, like
Hmm.
everybody else.
Yep.
Most of the other people that are in the sales arena, and a lot of founders who didn't think they would get into sales. And then I realized how important it is, right? And kind
Hmm.
of just doubled down on that, and it made a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I love this, and I think about just the value of revenue in a business. Like the business does not function if you don't have revenue, and
It's
revenue
oxygen,
happens,
yeah.
right. It happens from sales, and
Hmm.
if you don't have a sales system and process in your organization, you're going to be in trouble. And even if it's going well, like I think there's always opportunity to fine tune it, to build the systems, to be able to scale it up, because that's ultimately, if we want to grow our business, that's what we're going to need to have happen. Because a we just look at how limited the business is. If all of the sales is limited to the founder, right?
Hmm.
That person only has so much time and energy. And if they're doing anything outside of sales, like if we grew, I'll say 30% one year, right? We can't grow 30% another year with the exact same amount of activity, because the
Yep.
unless the entrepreneur is going out and selling bigger ticket products to a different market, something along those lines. But because they only have so much time and energy, and if they just
Hmm.
keep repeating their work, there's going to be some limits there. So
For sure. And one of the big issues that a lot of companies have, and I know this because we had it, before, is as somebody who's, a sales focused founder, you get very focused on the deals that you're trying to close, right? And then
mhm,
what you do is you forget about all of the top of the funnel, pipeline type activities.
mhm,
And then what ends up happening is the revenue gets very lumpy in the business because you close a bunch of deals, and then you go, great, you pop your head up and you go, oh my god, my pipeline is completely empty.
yep,
And then you kind of scramble, do a bunch of prospecting, bring in some more deals, focus on those deals, and it just repeats itself, right? So,
uh,
and in terms of scaling, you need to have attention.
mhm,
You need to have the discipline, or you need to have the resources to focus on all of the different aspects, right? From
yep,
prospecting through to closing. And whether that means you're hiring additional sales reps, or whether that means you're going to, as a founder, continue on doing the kind of closing, and you're going to bring in maybe an SDR or a sales development rep to do that, top of funnel stuff. It's just something to definitely keep in mind,
yeah,
that to scale, on a linear basis, you need to really, really pay attention to all those different stages at the same
yeah.
time, which is difficult.
Yeah, Dave, I love that. And here's other things that I just think are so valuable. Unfortunately, I feel like in the marketplace, there's people out there selling sales and coaching and some of those other things, and they haven't been there and done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just look at the fact that your exits have totaled over $200 million. You've been through the ringer. You understand what it's like to be an entrepreneur. You're absolutely right. Statistically speaking, just go get a W-2 job. You
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be out here in the
Yeah.
marketplace, because the failure rate's just high. So, Dave, anybody that's out there that has a business needs to increase sales. So they should go check out the book, The Delusional Founder, that you've got available on Amazon. They can get the hard copy Kindle. That's a fantastic way to go. And then also, can you tell us a little bit about your coaching and who, uh, again, an ideal client is? Because I think we should disqualify some of the people that don't fit your ideal
Mm-hmm.
client. So,
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, Patrick, I've kind of gone down the entrepreneurial path, several times. I've had three different, companies that have all exited. And at this point in my career, really what gets me, excited in the morning is working with entrepreneurs that are, kind of at the stage that I was, years ago, to go, hey, I've got this product and I really want to grow my revenue. And really the sweet spot for me is companies that are in technology businesses, that are in a B2B environment,
mhm.
that are really looking to, scale up to that 10 million, that kind of first $10 million in revenue. And really want to look at kind of doubling down on their sales side of things.
Fantastic. And the best place for people to go is techwhale.com to connect with you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my personal website, and like you said, I do a little bit of coaching and training and consulting. And yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody who's, maybe in the position that I was in, that might need some help, and
Yeah.
check out the book, and let me know whatever questions you've got. I'm here.
Fantastic. We'll put links to all that in the show notes for people
Perfect.
to check out your website and download or order the book. So, um, So Dave, I like to just recap, I think about sales success, right? We've built a system and a process that includes our value proposition. We define who we sell to and have created a sales process. We start
Mm-hmm.
doing those things, we're generating revenue and our business is growing, and that's fun. That's what we're doing as entrepreneurs. That's kind of the scoreboard. And I think about if we don't do those things, we might have a great product, but we're just frustrated. And at the end of the day, that can lead us to, quitting the business and going and
Mm-hmm.
doing something else. And we don't want to see that. We just look at the entrepreneur as the backbone of the U.S. economy. And, if they can continue to deliver value to the consumer, that's how we grow. And so I just appreciate all of this wisdom and guidance today on how to grow and develop our sales process.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I enjoyed the conversation here.
Very good. Anything else before we wrap up that we didn't touch on that we should have?
No, I think like you said, the key thing is here, there's a lot of companies out there that do have a very good or great product. And unfortunately, a lot of those don't, get the results that they deserve. And I think, thinking hard about your sales and the ability to take your product to market in the way that's going to resonate with your customers makes a huge difference. And for me, nothing makes me more excited when you come in, talk to somebody who is in that position, and you kind of show them the light, so to speak, and they implement, this type of playbook, and it yields really great results. So that's exciting for me.
Wonderful. Dave Hanley, this has been fantastic. I appreciate all your time and wisdom. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yep. That's a wrap on today's episode. I hope you found incredible value in this conversation with Dave Hanley, and that you're walking away with actionable strategies to level up your sales process and grow your business. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who could benefit from these insights. Whether it's a fellow entrepreneur, a business partner, or someone struggling to scale, this information could be the breakthrough they need. And remember, you're a vital entrepreneur. You're vital because you're the backbone of our economy, creating opportunities, driving growth, and making an impact. You're vital to your family, creating abundance in every aspect of life. And you're vital to me because you're committed to growing your wealth, leading with purpose, and creating something truly great. You've worked too hard to let the IRS be your biggest expense. Let's change that together. Head to vitalstrategies.com/tax to see how much you could be saving. Thank you for being a part of this community of vital entrepreneurs. I appreciate you, and I look forward to having you back here next time on the Vital Wealth Strategies podcast, where we help entrepreneurs minimize their taxes, master wealth, and optimize their lives. Until then, keep taking action, keep building, and keep creating something amazing. And I'll see you in the next episode.